Welcome to Bible study at Our Lady of the Wayside. We're getting ready for the Feast of the Holy Family, and we've got some particularly interesting readings. The first reading that we'll have is from the Book of Sirach, which you'll need your Catholic Bible for. And if you have a Catholic Bible and you still can't find the Book of Sirach, it is sometimes called the Book of Ecclesiasticus, not the same as Ecclesiastes.
Is it also
Ben Sirach, also Ben Sirach.
Ecclesiastics?
Nope. You've got a Protestant Bible and it's got Ecclesiastes, which is a different book. So just to confuse you.
That's
And
all right.
to be even more confusing, Sirach was the grandfather of Jesus who wrote the book, but they didn't want to call the book Jesus because that would be confusing. And so
More confusing.
so let's give the book two different names, and then Luther pulled it out of the Bible because the Jews had pulled it out of the Bible years before because they didn't have the Hebrew copy, which is now available. So someday we'll talk about that again. So several of you have heard my long spiel on why there are books missing from the Protestant Bible. So the first reading is Sirach, and it is a challenge because our world is hostile to the family. And the Book of Sirach is reminding us that the relationship of children and parents is not just a thing for childhood, but it's a thing for the larger culture. And we'll have a chance to talk about that. There's an optional reading from the Book of Genesis, and that is an unusual reading. And the reason I wanted to talk about that, even though it's an optional one and you might not hear it at church, is because there's a reading between the lines challenge in that when God says to Abram, count the stars. Well, you imagine to yourself that they're outside and that there are stars shining in the sky. But if you look a little bit earlier, you find that this is happening in the daytime. And so Abram is invited to count the stars when he can't see any stars, but he has to know that the stars are there anyway. So that chance of reading between the lines is fun. So we'll look at that reading. The middle reading is from the Book of Colossians, and it includes those challenging lines: wives, be submissive to your husbands, and husbands, love your wives. And the funny thing is, the church has the option of leaving those particular verses out after you hear Paul's list of 13 virtues to practice. So Paul first leads us in with 13 virtues to practice, then hits us with that challenging line, which does not say women be subject to men. And it does include the mutual submission of husband and wife so that the partnership will be strong. And so we'll have some chance to talk about that and how men have already learned. They learn submission when they're practicing sports, when they're playing sports, and when they're in the army. Men know submission. Women are used to being independent. Women know love. Men have to be reminded to love. So Paul is very canny here. He's not being hostile to women in the slightest, or being hostile to men. He's talking about building strong relationships. So we'll look at that reading. And then there's another chance to read between the lines in the gospel. And I've looked at a lot of commentaries over the years about the story of the presentation. And there's one little piece that I've never seen anybody mention. And that has to do with the personality of Mary. We don't hear many words from Mary. We hear her say at the marriage at Cana, do whatever he tells you. We hear that, and we hear her beautiful Magnificat, and we hear her humility and her acceptance of her motherhood. But there's something else about her personality that shows between the lines in this presentation reading, because it talks about a woman named Anna from the tribe of Asher, who's the daughter of Phanuel, who has lived at the temple for years and who was married, and then her husband died. And you hear about this woman why do we know so much backstory about this obscure old lady who hangs around in the temple? It must be because Mary was the kind of person, when she met somebody, she listened to their whole story. I used to take a friend of mine to the doctor, and so we'd sit in waiting rooms, and I always had my book because I always take a book with me pretty much wherever I go. So I'm reading my book, but my friend is getting the life stories of all the other people who are in the waiting room. And it hit me when that's what made this reading hit me so hard. Mary was the kind of person, when she met somebody, she cared enough about them to really listen to their story. So there's something lovely about that. And so that's the challenge of reading between the lines. And there are other pieces between the lines in all of the readings that we've got. And so if you'd like to have more practice reading the Bible between the lines, I invite you to look into the possibility of joining us at Bible study at Our Lady of the Wayside, 9:30 on Friday mornings, either via Zoom. You can see the people up on the screen over there, and either by Zoom or in person. And we have a lot of fun here. That's why we're here. So blessings and peace, everybody.